Is it really a late ADHD diagnosis or is it just a fad? And if your doctor won't give you a diagnosis, what do you do? Or are you just crazy?
Welcome to Beyond Meds. We're unlocking ADHD management without medication, optimizing physical health, harnessing mindfulness, and biohacking for a med-free life. It's time to take a holistic approach and treat the whole person, not just the symptom.
There's been a significant rise in adult ADHD diagnoses in the last handful of years. From national population surveys, it's been noted an increase from about 6% to 10% between 1997 to 2016. And we've heard that it's related to, improved ways to detect ADHD, especially in women, given the symptoms displayed differently than in men, such as the old generalization of the little boy who can't sit still in class. Then, of course, there's social media, notably TikTok, and the countless videos of ADHDers speaking out about their experience with ADHD, and then the signs and symptoms that you should look for in case you may have it as well. But in this episode, we're exploring other possible causes of a late diagnosis that you may have not thought about or heard about, along with the question, is it ADHD or just stress, or maybe something else? At the end, we are going to give you some strategies on how to move forward and find some grounding in your life if you're struggling, whether you're officially diagnosed or not. If you are new to our podcast, welcome. On this podcast, we explore other hypotheses, other ideas around ADHD that you may have not heard of, thought about, or really explored on your own. And the reason we do this is because we are a thought leader in the ADHD industry, specifically for the non-medication route. So through this podcast and through our resources online, we are giving you strategies to manage ADHD completely medication-free. Whether you still use medication or not, that doesn't matter. We don't judge. Everyone has their own path and journey in managing and living with ADHD, but we are here solely to give you the non-medicated strategies and resources. And with that, it includes exploring different ideas around ADHD and looking at it from different lenses that you probably haven't thought of or heard of before. Without getting ahead of ourselves, let's dive into the possible causes of a late diagnosis that you probably haven't heard of. I saw this a lot with clients and just people in my life and through social media, that when there was a major life change, and by that I mean there was a new stress added into someone's life, so much that the nervous system couldn't handle anymore. And the stress can be good or bad. And when that stress came in, that's when the diagnosis seemed to happen in that person's life. The stress could be having a baby, getting married, maybe separating or getting divorced, getting fired from a job, maybe starting a new job. It could be any of the significant life change that all of a sudden it was too much, the nervous system couldn't handle, and there was this breaking point. And then I saw the diagnosis of ADHD happen. I'm going to explore what I mean by that. But the other way I saw this happening was maybe there wasn't a major change in that person's life, but it was a combination of events where the nervous system couldn't handle it anymore. There's just too much stress. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back, and that led to the ADHD diagnosis because the person was struggling. So my hypothesis around this is if the nervous system is in a chronic dysregulated state, and that means your nervous system, it's either in parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, or sympathetic, which is a fight or flight, a stress state. Isn't always bad, but when it's dysregulated, it means it can't find the balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic. Can't find the balance between rest, digest, and being in a stress state. Simple example, you go work out, that's putting your body in a stress state. After your workout, if you go for a nice walk for 5-10 minutes, you do some deep breathing for 5 minutes, you do some stretching, a nice cool down, you find some moments of calm and peace so your body can come back to a calm state, so it can recover from the workout, build new muscle, and whatnot. That it means that's the balance of your nervous system. But chronic dysregulation means you're not finding that. You're often in that sympathetic stress state, and maybe always. And if you're always in that state and that just builds over time, finally, like I said, there's that breaking point of like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm actually really struggling. what's wrong with me? And then we see on social media, through the news, wow, ADHD, maybe I have that because I'm lining up with a lot of the symptoms. The other way I see this is maybe you are quite regulated in your nervous system, or you have some dysregulation, but not as, maybe not as severe as the next person. But then you have a major life change, which puts you over the edge where your nervous system can't find regulation anymore. And that could be moving across the country and starting a new job and then getting fired from said job. And you're like, this is too much stress. I don't have the resources, the support system, or the tools to handle this anymore. What do I do? And we saw a lot of that actually during COVID, where a lot of people's lives were changed instantly. And if you didn't have the resources, the tools, support system, that could put you in this chronic dysregulated state, which could show up as ADHD or could be ADHD. And that's something we're going to explore in this episode as well. I'm going to share one from each point here. The first one being this big life change, body can't handle anymore, leading to a diagnosis. So my friend, she had a baby recently within the last year. I went to visit her. Her baby, I guess, was like 9 months old. And she's like, Gaia, guess what? She's like, I was just diagnosed with ADHD. And all this time, I thought you had it and like kind of like understood it and maybe resonated with parts, but knew that I didn't have it. And now I'm big diagnosed. A lot of things in my life make sense. When she told me that, I wasn't surprised given just our conversations and how we interacted. I mean, as someone with ADHD, and you may know as well, you tend to just gravitate towards others who are of similar mind, who have similar neurodivergence. So I wasn't surprised when she told me. It also didn't surprise me that the diagnosis came after she had a baby and was really struggling on mat leave. She told me a little bit more of that journey through 9 months postpartum, where she's like, everything just kind of fell apart. She's like, shit hit the fan. There's some depression. She's like, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't handle it anymore. And this gal, my friend, she is high up in her profession, working very long days every day. She strives on that and did her job very well. There was lots of travel, lots of meetings, long hours, just this consistent demand. She was thriving. And honestly, she wasn't someone that I'd pegged to have kids because she was really thriving in her career. Same with her husband. She was ecstatic when she got pregnant and it was planned. But that big change in her life, the edge where she was managing her work fine, at least from the outside looking in. But with any high stress job like that, a lot of demands, she was probably in a dysregulated state a lot of the time, just given the demands of the job. And by that, there was a lot of stress with the job. So fast forward to having a baby, big life change, more stress, good stress, but more stress. And that seeming to me pushed her over the edge. She's like, I can't handle this anymore. What do I do? And she had mentioned she found meditation, she found mindfulness. That was around the same time as her diagnosis. She started to learn a little bit about human design. And she's like, now I'm managing. Okay, this makes a lot of sense because you got some clarity of if you have ADHD, whether it's a misdiagnosis or not, doesn't matter. She found some clarity in her life. She was able to find meditation, mindfulness, some resources for her to start to regulate her nervous system. Now she's managing. So that's one example. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves with what I'm going into further about, is it late diagnosis or is it just a breaking point? On to the second example of the opposite of this chronic dysregulation and then just that straw that broke the camel's back. I'll give my personal example. It's a little bit of mixed in with some of the big life changes, but how I see it is really the buildup of events. So myself, the perfectionist, the type A, the hard worker, the go. That's been my life. And then right before COVID, moved halfway across the country. Essentially, wasn't starting a new job. I was taking on a new project with some contract work I was doing and had plans for my business at the time as well. So I was doing contract work and had my business. Everything was going to be perfect. It was all laid out. I was like, yeah, this is going to work. I was at the time doing a lot of circus training. I'm like, that's going to be amazing. Perfectly planned. everything blew up in my face. And then COVID shut down everything. So that was a big trigger. However, I navigated that fine. I was like, okay, let's just get a job. I got a job in essential service. I was making money to get by. And my sanity was okay because I was working with people every day. I was getting out of the house. I was enjoying where I had just moved to the West Coast. I was still able to do some circus training throughout COVID and even at home. But I was struggling because what should have been in my mind so simple, I'm working just a regular job, 3 hours a week, like a very simple entry-level type job, which was in the essential service. And I was rebuilding my side business, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get stuff done. I couldn't focus. I kept going in circles. I kept getting my own way. I kept planning and replanning and never actually getting the task done that I wanted to. And it got to a point of like, this is a pattern I see myself in all the time. I keep doing more, trying to do more, but it actually doesn't actually produce more results. I'm not moving forward. I'm just burning out and getting frustrated and things aren't working for me. And that led to myself getting ADHD diagnosis. How I look at it, it was just this culmination of stress over all of the years of doing more, of pushing harder, of like, this isn't good enough. The stress of perfectionism among other stressors, and couldn't handle it anymore. I was in a very chronic dysregulated state. And you can see, although there's life changes, it was really the culmination of them that led me to the diagnosis. I remember working with a client where she didn't have a big life change, but at one point she's like, I can't do my job anymore. And it was because all of these things leading up to it. She had I think 2 kids. She was working full time, but was also trying to get back into shape, trying to eat healthy, trying to manage a household, trying to keep up with her job and even promote, and also manage a marriage. And she's like, I can't do it anymore. All of these things that were pushed onto her, being in a dysregulated state most of her life as we dove into her childhood, just push her over the edge to being like, I can't manage, led to the diagnosis. If you hear yourself in some of these examples, whether you ended up getting a diagnosis or maybe you're one of the few in the group that resonates, you're struggling, you go to the doctor, and the doctor is saying, no, you don't have ADHD, this is just stress, or this is just adulthood, or this is something else, it's just a fad, you don't have it, I'm not diagnosing it. Because I've heard that from a good handful of people. I want to then explore the question, is it a late diagnosis or is it just a breaking point or something else? And how do we know and how do we move forward from it, whatever the answer is? Let's first define what is ADHD. On a basic level, it's a developmental delay of the brain that affects the prefrontal cortex and affects dopamine production, leading to executive dysfunction. How we see it, and it's a hypothesis we have, and we have heard reiterated in other studies from researchers and thought leaders in the space, is that if the developmental delay is in isolation, meaning in the perfect world where we can control all elements, is that if you were raised in a household that was really safe, where you had a regulated nervous system, I would see it as having no significant stress, no significant trauma, big T or little t trauma, where your needs were attuned to by your parents, then even if you had this developmental delay of the brain, we believe that you'd have very few symptoms of ADHD and you'd probably be fine with coping with your ADHD. You probably wouldn't display the symptoms. You'd get through school, through life relatively okay. There wouldn't be as much struggle, which would mean you would never even go and search for the diagnosis because there's no significant struggle in doing the daily tasks, the executive functioning. I like to look at it as 2 ways. You have the developmental delay in the brain, which is something that is permanent, but then you have your environment, which is a variable. So if you have the developmental delay, but your environment is, safe, it provides a regulated nervous system for yourself, then you can be fine. But if you have the developmental delay, the ADHD in your brain, and a stressful, traumatic, or a childhood where you didn't feel safe, your needs weren't attuned to, then is where we'd see the big struggles with ADHD. the more stress or the more trauma, bacterial loyalty trauma, like the more severe that is, I believe you would see more struggles with ADHD, greater symptoms. You'd be, if we look at it on a spectrum, more ADHD in very basic terms here. I saw this working with one-to-one clients. I saw this just with conversations in the ADHD community, that the folks who had more trauma, more stress, more difficult childhoods, primarily where their parents were having hard on them, or there was a lot of negative beliefs, a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of not feeling good enough, really low self-worth in childhood, not feeling safe at home, are the ones that suffered more from ADHD and other comorbidities as well. If we go back to what we were talking about previously of the late diagnosis, the two different ways that we see it. So say you are someone that grew up in a very safe household, needs were attuned to. You generally had a regulated nervous system, but the developmental delay was there. You could be fine until, say, this is where we often see it, your late 30s, mid 40s, a major stress hits your life that kind of throws you off and you can't regulate anymore. Or what is, I feel, more common is, through 20s, 30s into 40s, the stress just builds up and up and up because you got a 9-to-5 job, you ended up marrying, having kids, but say it wasn't what you wanted, it was kind of just following societal programming, so it's leading to a lot of stress in your life because it wasn't what you truly wanted at a soul core level, at least at that time. Maybe there's some bitterness, some resentment, a lot of stress, and you haven't had the tools or resources to regulate your nervous system from that. You finally hit that breaking point where now you're going to start to display the symptoms of ADHD because the developmental delay was always there, but now the stress is too great that you can't manage anymore. Now look at the other example where someone was raised in a household with a lot of stress. So they're already displaying a lot of ADHD symptoms, really struggling, but still the diagnosis doesn't come into adulthood. But perhaps the diagnosis came because of awareness, or there's this major stress that hits their life that they were coping fine with the stress, they were managing, but the major stressor hits. They get fired. They start a new job. They're in a new relationship. It's different than what they're used to coping with. They can't manage anymore, and that pushes them over the edge. ADHD diagnosis and increased symptoms and struggles. If you didn't have the developmental delay, let's say through your 20s, 30s, into your 40s, you have an overload of stress and you're not able to regulate your nervous system. The symptoms that come from that are very similar to ADHD symptoms. And we have an episode that goes over that, which I'll link in the show notes. Or you have this chronic stress, chronic dysregulated nervous system, maybe even through childhood into adulthood, and maybe that major stress just pushes you over the edge, that breaking point. Again, symptoms very, very similar to ADHD, but you just don't have the developmental delay. And because when it's diagnosed, brain scans aren't done, it's not a possibility as we know at this stage, it's really hard to say, is it actually ADHD? Is there actually developmental delay? Or is it just stress? We don't talk too much about medication on this podcast, but it has been said that if you take medication and it helps, it means there is a developmental delay in the brain, which means it actually is at a brain level. If it doesn't help, then it's something else, perhaps just stress. I don't fully believe that. We don't fully believe that, given there has been studies showing that ADHD, along with depression and a few other mental disorders, actually have no chemical imbalance, which means dopamine production is the same. There's actually isn't a deficiency or it's not affected with ADHD, meaning medication could help anyone. Even with ADHD, it may still not help you. So that is something we'll explore in a different episode, but something to keep in mind. If medication didn't work for you, we believe that doesn't really mean anything whether you have ADHD or not, and vice versa. I want to wrap this up with this analogy that will hopefully make sense. I look at it as this mind-body balance. If your mind and your body are on board, you're good. But if both aren't on board, that's where the struggle begins. So developmental delay in brain, it's your mind, but you're managing stress, you're regulated, that's your body, you're okay. But when the mind, this developmental delay, and the body dysregulated, too much stress, your body can't handle it, can't process it, that's when the struggle starts to begin. We're also going to add, because we mentioned this a lot on the podcast and in our company, whether you are officially diagnosed with ADHD or not, whether it is ADHD or just a dysregulated nervous system, we don't judge. You are welcome here because whatever you're feeling, whatever you're struggling with is real for you. Whether it has a label or not, whether medication has helped or not, that doesn't matter. If a diagnosis is giving you relief and permission to look at your life a different way and some steps forward, fantastic. But if you haven't received the diagnosis, that's okay because what you're going through is still real and valid. And the strategies we're going to share are hopefully will still help you. And we have some other episodes as well where we dive deeper on that if you're diagnosed, undiagnosed, or misdiagnosed. Okay, back to original question. You go to the doctor, they're not diagnosing you, but you're struggling. What do you do? We're going to link in the show notes, again, our podcast when we go into that of what a diagnosis is actually going to give you. And that's a question we want you to ask yourself. It's, why am I searching for the diagnosis? So go listen to that episode. So if you're wanting the diagnosis because you're looking for medication, then yes, to try and search for a doctor that will diagnose you because that is what you are feeling you need at this moment. Great. But if it's just nervous system dysregulation, there are other options that aren't just ADHD meds. And of course, it's not a medication podcast, so we're not going to explore the medication options in this. But when you go to your doctor, if you're not getting a diagnosis, we encourage you then to ask or even to tell your doctor that ADHD or not, is there other ways I can manage stress? Because stress and ADHD symptoms show up very similarly, starting to explore stress management along with managing big and changing emotions will assist you in finding some grounding. Let's look back to the mind-body connection. So meds work for your mind. But there's also the other component, which is the body, which is, again, what we explore here heavily, given we use a biohacking approach, which means going or looking at the body in ways we can support our body in managing ADHD. If you're not getting the diagnosis, look for therapy and counseling. It's a great step. Often you don't need a doctor referral, and there's lots of great therapists, counselors, and even coaches online. Coaching is a great option. I personally was a coach under this brand. Coaching, they're not regulated, which can be fantastic because they can pull from a lot of different modalities to support you in your journey versus counseling therapy where it is regulated and they can only follow what the regulations allow them to. So pros and cons to both. We do encourage you to do your research. And if you do need some referrals for coaches that we recommend, just send us an email. We'll put our email in the show notes. Our next step for you here is that there are tons and tons of resources out there for managing ADHD, both good and bad. You have social media, you have podcasts, including this one. We encourage you to stick to what resonates and don't second guess it. If you are scrolling TikTok and someone's video really speaks to you and their brand speaks to you, follow that. With ADHD, especially if you're diagnosed or not, and if you're in a stress state, we often second guess stuff because we just want to find that solution. We want to find that grounding. But when something resonates, that means at a core level, we believe that you are meant to hear it. You're meant to see it. So stick with that until it doesn't resonate anymore or until the next thing comes along that you resonate with. Use what works, leave what doesn't, and give yourself that permission to change, to grow with the resources you're finding. That's absolutely perfect. Also, reminder that even with ADHD, what works for one is not going to work for everyone. We're all 100% unique beings. Find what works, leave what doesn't, and don't second guess it. Our next strategy is to find community, whether it's a fellow ADHDer, someone else just on a mental health journey, or is it just exploring finding consciousness and growing as a human and finding community in that? Having a support system, whether it's in person, a specific group, or just like we said, this feeling of belonging to the collective, to a higher version of yourself, to universe or source or God. Finding that support, that community is really, really beneficial for navigating this. It's going to help you with the second guessing and taking action moving forward, but also knowing that you are supported and guided in this journey. Last kind of strategy or more note we want to leave you with is there's nothing wrong with you. Diagnosis or not, there's nothing wrong with you, and nothing can take away your inherent worth or determine your worth. And this is one reason why I personally like to use human design and what we look at through the brand as well. And I'll link this episode in the show notes where we dive into human design and ADHD. The reason I say that is human design shows you who you are as you are, shows you who you're designed to be, and ADHD has no effect on your worth. ADHD may cause struggles in your life, and there may be more challenges, but that's actually perfect. That is part of your journey, and you chose this journey. You, at a soul level, you chose to show up on this journey and to navigate this. When challenges come, when the struggles are there, this is what you are meant to learn, at least in this lifetime, and what you'll end up sharing with others. So embrace the challenge, embrace the suck, but nothing can determine your worth or take away from it. Who you're designed to be, who you are at a core level is absolutely perfect. A diagnosis doesn't define you, but it can give you an understanding and the direction to move forward. But if you can't get the diagnosis, or if you aren't ADHD, you're welcome to self-label if that feels safe and good for you and gives you that permission. But most important is to follow what's helpful for you and what feels right. And if it feels right, there's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with your strategy you're using, nothing wrong with you, ADHD or not. And like we mentioned, if you're struggling, that's real and it's valid. And it needs to be addressed if you feel like you're not getting done or taking action on things that are important to you in your life. And there are so many ways to do that doesn't just rely on having an ADHD diagnosis. Before you shut off this podcast and completely forget about it, we would absolutely love if you just take the 10 seconds to hit subscribe and leave a rating and review. This helps us reach more ADHDers who are looking for med-free options to manage ADHD through a biohacking approach. We'd also appreciate if you sent this to a friend you think this would resonate with. And we have so many more episodes coming your way, so stay tuned. And we'll see you next time.